nature doesn't care about what we believe. Nature just acts. And if you believe or not in climate change, the fire doesn't care.
Yeah. And Los Angeles is a coastal city. You mentioned that the oceans have warmed more in the last 15 years than in the previous 150.
So there's this region over the northern hemisphere where a lot of shipping happens. So there's ships going from the United States to Asia and from North America to Europe. And those ships were emitting a lot of sulfur emissions, and also over the Mediterranean Sea. And then the sulfur reflects sunlight, but it also makes clouds whiter and reflect more sunlight. And now in 2015 and in 2020, there were regulations to reduce these sulfur emissions, which caused a reduction in how much sunlight was reflected back to space. And we see with NASA satellite data that now more heat is absorbed by the oceans. And also, indeed, as you mentioned, over the past 15 years, the warming of the sea surface, the temperature increase of the sea surface temperatures, the oceans, has been higher than in the preceding 150 years. That's over the North Atlantic, over the North Pacific, but also over the Mediterranean Sea. And the Mediterranean Sea, in 3.5 months from now, on May 1st, there will be another regulation to reduce sulfur emissions again by 80%, which will cause even more accelerated warming regionally around the whole of the Mediterranean. And we really need to prepare for the associated risks, because this comes with a lot of additional extreme weather, faster warming, and we really need to be aware and study what kind of effects this can have on the regional climate of the Mediterranean, of Europe, of North Africa, of the Middle East. Of course, all these countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea will be affected if the Mediterranean Sea gets much warmer. And it's important to note that the sea, when it heats up, it holds over 3,000 times as much energy as the atmosphere for the same volume. So that really there's a lot of energy inside the water. And of course, that can cause these extreme weathers, like what we saw, for example, last year in Spain, where these extreme rainfall, which the city wasn't built for. I did say indeed that the Mediterranean will be heating up very fast, and that's exactly what we saw. I think last year was about half a degree warmer than the previous years over the Mediterranean. It was really, and that's for, of course, the Mediterranean is a very large sea. And if the whole sea heats up by that much over such a short period of time, that's really worrying. And as we keep reducing the sulfur emissions over the Mediterranean, again with 80% starting on May 1st, 2025, 3.5 months from now, that will cause much more heat. And of course, we don't know exactly what, because there's also the weather, the variability. But we really need to prepare for more extreme rainfall. So the extreme weathers will be more extreme. That's a general rule with climate change. If it's dry, it will get drier. If it's wet, it will get wetter, because of the change. Stronger winds, stronger droughts. So that's what we need to prepare for, and that's I don't know exactly what the focus areas are in Turkey, but I can imagine replenish the water reservoirs when you can. Make sure that you have the right policies in place for fires. Of course, you had the earthquakes. Then you see that, and of course that's not related to climate change, but it's also a natural disaster, where you discover that yes, it's really important to prepare for natural disasters, and now we know that we will get disasters which are not normal for the climate we had before, because the climate is rapidly changing. So yeah, and that's the systems, the cities, the waterworks are often not prepared for this.
Can we say this is just the starting? We will see more.
Yes, much more, because as I mentioned, what we call them aerosols, these sulfur particles mainly, but also from other particles, they have been masking the warming effect from greenhouse gases. So for example, over Europe, and especially Western Europe, there were these desulfurization systems installed at the coal plants, and Europe is the fastest warming continent in the world because the warming was hidden for decades, and now all of a sudden it's rapidly warming. And for example, last year was about a quarter of a degree Celsius for the whole of Europe, for the annual average, warmer than any previous year. So it's really warming very fast, and it will get worse as long as we keep continuing to increase the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, and will get worse faster if we keep doing that while also reducing the air pollution. And of course, that's what we're doing because we don't want the harmful effects of the air pollution. But we really need to be aware of this and adapt and make sure that we reduce the associated risks.